I am doing well. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Well, we have plenty to do. Let me make sure I have my card deck close by so we can make sure we do that. But we have not a series of topics to talk about. And first one, I don't know if we'll spend a lot of time on it, but we're definitely going to spend a little bit on the possible end of the Gaza war
Yeah.
between the Palestinians and Israelis, and then we have the conversation with Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates that went on last week. Then we wanted to spend a little more time talking about estranged families because it's something. It's a kind of a thing these days.
Yeah.
Increasingly, it seems. If we have time, definitely want to talk about the lack of, excuse me, sex education in America today. It's a problem.
It's a
It's a
problem. And wait, and as somebody who not only wrote a book on human sexuality for high school kids, but also was a human sexuality educator, it ain't got no better.
it's
Mhm.
all right. And then
Can I, sorry,
well, last thing
can
I'll
I
say is
tell you?
we have a side eye about the troops in Chicago, which I was reminded that's more than a side eye, but we'll definitely talk about it. But you wanted to get
Yeah.
something in.
Well, I just wanted to say I don't know how you're feeling, but I have to say my mental health has really taken a hit over the last couple of weeks because when other people are in pain and suffering, I feel that, right? And I think there's so much suffering out there. And it just I've fluctuated between being very sad and very angry and there's just a lot going on. It just feels bad all around, right? Like there's workplace stress and people losing their jobs, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that if anyone else is feeling that way, I'm right with you.
I'm with you, and it makes sense to use this card for the Djembe card today because what you're saying, I think, is poignant. And this is our card for today. I'm arriving here feeling blank. I'm
Um, let's see. Would I say emotionally tired? Emotionally tired. There's just too many negative, destructive things happening. We've talked about this for weeks, you and I, the lack of empathy, caring, and kindness for people. When we get to one of our topics, sort of two men who are in disagreement sitting down talking to one another. I'd like to see more of that. But it's been hard. It's been hard. I see the way that I think that what is happening in our world is going to have long term consequences and generational consequences. And it is hard to keep your head up when so many people are suffering. And even if you aren't personally suffering, if you care about other people, you can't help but be impacted by the human suffering around you.
it's one. Thank you for saying that. I really identify with what you're talking about because it does feel really heavy.
Yeah.
I know I'm arriving here with a sense of heaviness, a weightiness. I reflect on last evening. We were honoring the namesake for the education building at the University of Texas. His name is George Sanchez, and he was basically a trailblazer in the education space. He died in 1972, so he's been gone for some time. But just what he did and what he was doing during that time is such a reflection of what we're doing today. Because, to be honest, the weightiness, the heaviness, it makes sense, particularly when Trump was elected. How particularly a lot of black folks were like, "Well, we good. We tried to tell you," and but I think the difference today versus even then, because haven't gotten better. If anything, for a lot of folks, it's gotten worse. We've
Yeah.
seen the stories of people being kidnapped. We see when it's really literally in your back door
Yeah.
of what feels like the government coming in agitating things,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just a feeling; it's kind of I think people's account and witnessing of it, and so
Yeah.
it feels quite overwhelming. And I was talking to someone yesterday; they're just like, I'm just trying to live life, and I just want to do it. It's just too overwhelming, and if I think about it
Yeah.
too much, I want to cry.
Yeah, well, it feels very pandemic-esque, if that's a word, right? Where you are just hit by the number of death and destruction and fear and anxiety and stress. And, it's not the same thing,
No,
but it's a very similar feeling because you're hit all over, and people are struggling. So, every time you go to the grocery, everything is a struggle. And so it's hard. It's
It's
hard.
hard and struggle because things are more expensive, whether food or other kinds of things. People's business and vitality, as far as job opportunities, are limited or have been closed, shut down. I mean, there's so many real life things that are impacting
Healthcare is
people's.
going up if you have healthcare. I mean, it's just,
Yes, if you have it.
we don't do a good job of taking care of one another. I mean, we just don't.
And I think it's always been the issue. I think, it's great to talk about individualism, but the truth is, most of us don't have the capacity to just take care of ourselves. We need support, encouragement. We need a lifeline. So, yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Not to
I,
be
I did want to.
a Debbie Downer, but you
No, no,
asked, I
no.
was, yeah,
I think it's important, very much it's important to call out what the reality of people's lives. And if you don't do that, you're sugarcoating, you're ignoring, you're not actually attuning to where people might be. And so,
yeah,
and if you're not there, cool. But I think there's a good number of people who are.
yeah.
Um,
How about
but I
you?
did, I'm sorry.
How about you? What's your answer?
Oh no, no, I'm sorry. I was reflecting on just. I guess I didn't get to it. I do feel that sense of weightiness.
Mhm.
I'm encouraged by a few things here and there. I guess I mentioned the whole thing with Sanchez because at the end of it, people were like, "We gotta fight. We gotta work together. We got to collaborate." And so I still feel a sense of weightiness, but I'm maintaining some sense of optimism because I feel like there's a fight, particularly amongst folks who've been through this kind of thing before, even for all of us who've not seen anything like this, but
Yeah.
feeling a sense of, well, we got to get together and do something. So I have both feelings happening at the same time.
Okay.
But thanks for encouraging me to voice that. I do want to just start off by acknowledging. Someone asked the question, what is this going to do for the Trump presidency if the actual conflict or war between the Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza ends? And I just wanted to give some space to that because if it does happen, it's a big deal.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know. I'm optimistic. There's been a lot of conflict across the country about this war, but my hope is it actually does end because again, with 66,000 Palestinians, 20,000 of them are some children. So it's horrible.
It is
But my hope
horrible.
is that
I mean, it's
here around two
all horrible.
years,
Yeah, it's all horrible,
it
right?
is.
Like, death and destruction and, children dying, their parents die. It's all horrible,
Yeah.
right? It's all horrible.
Yeah, and I think just earlier this week we just had the 2 year anniversary. October 7th was the day that the people who were
Yeah,
actually at the concert for peace
yeah,
were being
yeah,
attacked, which is so horrible. And those individuals are killed on that day. So it's that's horrible. The death since
yeah.
then has been horrible. So, but I just want to acknowledge that because maybe there's something positive out of all this is the end of
Fair.
this destruction. But which one do you want to touch? Well, the other topics we had were the sex education, the Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, or the estranged families. Which one do you want to touch
Um,
first?
well, why don't we kind of talk a little bit about estranged families and then go back to sort of some of our other topics. Are you okay with
Okay.
that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Strange family. I think that's a great topic. I mean, I'll be honest. What came up for me for that one, the reason I initially thought about this one was because there was a book, and I forget the name of the author, so forgive me. But she, African American woman, who basically is talking about, she's been on the conservative side, and she's kind of going through these steps of how to make your life better. And one of the topics she focuses on is, and this is her perception that this generation seems to be too easily inclined to cut people off in their family, right?
Hmm.
They cut them
Hmm.
off because of things they've said, how they behaved. I think her criticism is that the things that people are doing or saying are not they haven't risen to the threshold for you to cut them off, but people are
Right.
doing it anyhow.
Yeah.
And I only bring it up because I do see a sense, I get a sense that that is a challenge that we're dealing with in general.
Hmm.
What's your
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, so one of my guilty pleasures is scrolling through TikTok. Often I like things like lighthearted, like dog videos or parodies and things like that. But I did notice a trend of people talking about not only, especially moms who their children have cut them off, but people who have cut off their parents. And it did make me really curious. And, you know, as a therapist, I often talk with my clients sort of about that. And there's some interesting research about it, right? That it is to cut somebody off emotionally, a close family member, is a hard thing to do, and it is not without a cost, right? And I have seen, and I know you've seen, in some situations like abuse or repeated boundary violations or, you know, extreme neglect, like there are some legitimate reasons why somebody would cut off a family member if that relationship is causing you harm and
Mhm.
there's no working through it, then that might be a good reason to cut somebody off, right? Um, you know, it's interesting, and I haven't read the book that you have, but in there you say that the author is like, it hasn't risen to the threshold, but the threshold isn't decided by her. The threshold is decided by the people in the relationship. And one of the things that, you know, as somebody who works with people who have a history of abuse and other sort of things, is that is an individual decision to make. And it is grounded in culture and generational values and religious values sometimes and a lot of things. But if a relationship is causing you major harm, and you know, but it's something to think about, but there are all kinds of ways to handle it. It does seem like more and more people are cutting family members off, but I can't talk about their reasons. I don't know their reasons. I do know that it is a hard decision to make. So that's my perspective. Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I think sometimes people don't understand that it what may appear like a flippant kind of like whatever. I'm just gonna cut
Yeah.
these folks out because you didn't get me the gift I wanted for Christmas. I mean, it sometimes minimized as being trivial when actually there's a story that's behind that that's actually more
Yeah.
serious because of
Yeah.
something else. And you know what? If it is trivial and people are cutting folks off, I mean, maybe that wasn't a worthwhile relationship in the first place. If you're just like
Yeah.
cutting people off left and right, I mean, I don't know what to say about that if that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think this is the challenge is that particularly let's just talk about the black community. I think sometimes there is this sense of undying loyalty and deference, even when
Hmm.
there's abuse and,
Yeah.
and mistreatment in family relationships, because they're saying, "Hey, that's my kinfolk, that's my family, that's my whatever," and we
Yeah.
tolerate things that we ought not tolerate. But
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
we're expected to endure because that's my
Right.
so and so. And let me just put my bias out there, Dr. Helm. I've been estranged from my father for over 10 years since my mother
Hmm.
passed away. And it's for the reasons that we're talking about here. It was
Yep.
not to get into too many personal, but it was those kinds of boundaries that were being
Yep. Yep.
crossed, behavior that was problematic. And it wasn't just a one time incident, it was a
Of
series of
course. Yep.
incidents, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I speak from that only as an example, and but also the struggle because you have other family members who are saying, "Hey,
Yep.
why don't it's your responsibility to fix this? You need to go fix this." I'm like, "How am I
Right. Well, because,
But
you know, so to your point, and I think this is an important point, right? That one, the relationship between a parent and a child, no matter how old the child is, it is the parent's responsibility early on to build the foundation of the relationship. So that's one, right? And if the parent doesn't do that, right, the kid doesn't owe the parent as they get to be an adult. You don't owe your parent, right? You don't owe them. You hopefully respect them, but the house gets built with a strong foundation, right?
yeah,
To handle differences. So that's one. Two, we often don't have the skills, right, to renegotiate relationships, to work through conflicts. Sometimes parents dig in and say, "Well, I'm right and you're wrong." And as children grow up and become adults, they don't tolerate that well, or giving unsolicited advice or telling, you know, criticizing, and all of those things can cause an estrangement, and it can cause undue damage. So the first thing in any relationships, you got to shut your mouth and listen to the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree, and even if you don't like it. It's really hard.
it
Yeah,
is.
my daughter just said to me the other day, she goes, "You are not listening to me." Now, I don't think she ever listens to me, right? And I was just like, I said, "Okay, okay, I'm sorry. Tell me what you want me to know." I'm not always the best listener either. And I have found myself as my kids get older apologizing more and taking responsibility because they see things that I don't see, right?
And
And I'm hopefully modeling that. I don't know.
Well, no, but I think you're spot on because I think one, there's generational differences, how our parents came up. There's a lot of
Yeah.
deference, like out of respect, right? Respect look like
Do as I
deference. You
say,
don't,
not as I
y-
do. Yeah.
yeah, right. But a lot of that came out of that slavery mindset of don't question authority because you might die, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are in an age where we don't necessarily need to die. I mean, there's still death going
Mhm.
on. Don't get me wrong, but
For sure.
there's less of it, and we feel like we've carved out a space to have more dialogue, particularly between adults, not a child who's always a kid, but adult children and their
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
and being held responsible for things that maybe we did wrong, and parents saying, you know what, I messed up, and I'm so sorry. I love you
Yeah.
so much, and that's what
Yeah.
I think that's
Because
what children are looking for.
right. And and there are always two sides to every story,
Of
right?
course.
There are two sides to every story. But I think for parents, we screw things up. We just do. Like you love your children, you do your best, you don't get it right. I'm already contributing to my baby's therapy fund. I'm sure you're gonna go talk about me. It's okay. It is
Yeah.
okay, right? Work that out. But, and I don't always think that I'm wrong, but there are times that I am wrong or I get it wrong or I misunderstand. So I always try to work on accepting responsibility for the part that I own because I'm aware that I got one real young teenager and then, two in middle school. And I want to have a relationship with them as they become adults. But the work that I'm putting in now matters. But I also don't have to always agree with everything they say, and they don't always have to agree with me. They know me. I know them. I don't know.
They know what's up.
They know what's up.
Well, and the last thing I'll say about this is that there was a film that came out, and again, I'm terrible with names of films, but it's a recent one. Let's say
Okay,
2022. And
that's
it's really
recent.
about forgiveness, right? And the
Mm-mm.
story is about a father who basically is this abusive, who's trying his best, right? He's not the worst person in the world, but he's trying his best. He's trying to teach his son how to be a man. But his version of manhood is really fucked up. And so the man, and he abandons him. He has alcohol problems, all kinds of stuff. And so the
Yeah,
son moves on, and he's pretty angry. But the father's like, "Well, will you forgive me? Because I'm not that person anymore. I'm sorry." And the son's like, "Thank you, I forgive you, and goodbye."
I mean,
That
yeah,
happens too, right?
yeah,
it,
yeah.
and I think some people have this idea that if you can work through things, then maybe there's a relationship to be had, and
Sometimes
sometimes that's
there
not the
is.
case.
Sometimes it's not. And I think the part of this that we haven't talked about is how painful it is for parents when their children are estranged from them, right? Like
Yes,
how painful. And, so there is another side of this. Like that hurts. I have
yes,
not had it happen to me. I hope it doesn't, but that hurts. Like that's your baby. Can
yeah,
I mention a sidebar topic that kind of fits in there?
yeah, yeah. Please.
So, for anyone listening, used to love Brian McKnight. Oh my goodness. When I was in college, woohoo, his music, yes. Yes, that. I love Brian McKnight. But of course, his son, Nico, passed away in his early 30s of cancer, and they were still estranged, right? And I just thought to myself, how could you be estranged from the minute? And I don't know all the details. It's not my business, but of course, now I'm talking about it, so it's a little bit my business. But, it's kind of like, what would it take? Your baby has cancer, he died, and you still weren't talking to him? Oh my gosh. You would carry that with you for the rest of your life. It's still your child.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was really he was upset with his son, and the son had some his own frustrations, but it seemed like Brian Knight was kind of like digging in his heels and was like refused to deal with him, and I'm like,
But
wow,
then when you
that's
found out your baby had cancer,
yeah. I love
I
my
mean,
babies
nothing.
just so
What
much
else
I
would
couldn't
matter? Nothing would matter. I'd
nothing.
be like, okay, I'm wrong. You right. Whatever. I am baby. But so
But
it,
I
yeah,
think what you're highlighting is the different kind of responsibilities parents have
yeah,
versus children. It's not the same. And
yeah,
as a parent, sometimes you got to take the bullet or whatever you want to call it and be like, I don't know what I did. I don't even know what to do. I fucked up. Let's
Yeah.
something.
Something, something. And, I mean, so there are two sides of two sides of every story. Um, but relationships are like that plant I have back there, right? You have to water them or they don't grow. Relationships change over time. You have to take care of them or they won't take care of you. And this for parents doesn't change at the you old and tired at the end of your life, right? If you didn't have a good relationship with your children before, on your deathbed they will not be there. They will not be there in the
That's
same way.
yeah. It sounds harsh, but it's real. It's
But
so
it's true
so
because
real.
the nature of the relationship doesn't actually change. And, I see this in my clients, right? It doesn't change at the end of life, right? My own father, who, he long since passed away, but he had abusive parents. He's like, I'm not a fan of them, right? I love them, but I don't always like them. And it didn't change as his parents aged. He took care of them, but it was different than I've seen other people how they take care of their parents when they have a close, loving relationship. And we're not all blessed with that, but
No,
yeah,
no. Well, I want us to transition to this Ta-Nehisi Coates Ezra Klein because I feel like it's
yeah,
another conversation that's in the gray. And just to give a little background, Ezra Klein has come out. He had some kind of article, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, if you're familiar with him, is a
yes,
brilliant writer as well. And they're both liberals, right? So that's
yes,
the tension here. They're both liberals, but Ta-Nehisi Coates had basically been critical of Ezra Klein, basically pointing out there's Ezra Klein is like a lot of white liberals who feel disinclined to have to discount or other people who are so-called on the other side of political or values perspective. Whereas Ta-Nehisi Coates is like, I'm black. One, I've been doing this my whole life. Number two, I can't deal with people who are not going to acknowledge my dignity, who are going to be racist, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, and I'm supposed to have some kind of dialogue with them. Are you crazy? And Ezra Klein being more like, well, I don't. That's half of the country. I don't want to,
hmm,
ignore those individuals. And so there was a lot of response, kind of to that kind of debate and the misalignment that I think maybe Ezra Klein had with particularly the experiences of a lot of black folks. I don't know. What was
hmm.
your sense of things?
So you sent it to me, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I got to watch about half. Here's what I liked about it. I liked that they sat down and had a dialogue about it, right? And that is what is not present today at all, right? They did not agree on something and they sat down and they had a dialogue about it. Like they were invited. Coates was invited to sit down and he thanked him in the beginning, right? Like
Hmm.
so they could have a conversation. And when you have a conversation with somebody who you don't agree with, sometimes we want to say it's about changing their mind, but really it's about being heard. We are allowed to disagree with one another. Like
Yeah.
we all don't agree, right? I tell the
Right.
couples I work with, y'all ain't always going to agree on stuff. That is okay. But it's really about being heard and having
Yes.
your viewpoint not even necessarily respected, but at least respectfully conveyed so that you
Yes.
can dialogue about it. That is what I call a process issue, right? It's the process is more important than changing somebody's mind. When you feel heard, you feel like you can collaborate more, right? That you are more together. That's missing from our government. What did our president say that, at Charlie Kirk's memorial that he doesn't, he doesn't wish his enemies well and wants to
Oh,
get his
yeah.
enemies anyway. Yeah, and I just thought, well, so you're not, no surprise, modeling any kind of collaboration whatsoever, which continues this us versus them, which is why we are where we are for many reasons. Okay, many reasons. But it's so discouraging and damaging. We can't talk to each other.
Well, but I love what you're suggesting here is that for the Trumps of the world, it's about power and control and being able to do what the hell you want with no kind of recourse or help being held accountable. Whereas again, we have two people who are friends who self-described as being friends who live in many of the same kind of spaces, probably have a lot of the same friends, and invited each other in a dialogue with not the goal of finding an agreement, but expressing themselves and sharing their
Yeah,
thoughts, which is critical because unfortunately that oftentimes doesn't happen. We're quick to criticize, which is not necessarily the
yeah,
problem, But it's now, and I really love what you're saying. It's acknowledging the dialogue and staying in a relationship with one
Correct.
another despite the
Correct.
disagreement we may have.
Yeah. Jimmy Kimmel did something similar. His opening after his right show was temporarily removed, where he's sort of inviting dialogue. He's saying, I don't agree with all of these things. What happened is horrible, right? And so it is hard, it is getting harder and harder to listen to people you don't agree with. We make assumptions. I was just riding with my daughter. We were coming back from somewhere and she's like, oh, I can tell how that person voted because this is what's on their car. And I said, you really have to be careful about making an assumption about what type of person this is or how they voted. You don't know anything about them. They are just riding in the car ahead of us, and you wouldn't want it if people did the same thing to you. But that
Right,
is so happening today. And
right.
this us versus them, and it's so damaging.
It is, it is. And one of the things I think was interesting about their dialogue is there was a point, and I forget where it was in the conversation, where Ezra Klein kind of acknowledged he didn't know what else to do. He talked about meditation practices, and a lot of people kind of, kind of dinged him for that because, like, bro, you're going to meditate about this? Come on. Um, but I think he was being honest about how he's trying to navigate this, and maybe
Yeah,
maybe not as well equipped as far as how to navigate this situation. I think
yeah,
what Ta-Nehisi Coates kind of laid down was like, look, I'm not going to talk to those people, and I'm okay with that. I don't have any sense
yeah,
of somehow I'm conflicted about that. But I'll talk to
yeah,
you. I'll talk to my friend
yeah,
who I don't agree with, and we'll have a
yeah,
nice little dialogue, and we'll have maybe a better understanding. And I see where you're coming from. I hope you see where
yeah,
I'm coming from, and maybe that will add to both our lives. But that was, I mean, I really like how you bring that up because I think
yeah,
that's such a powerful part of this situation we're
yeah.
in today.
And on the other hand, now I'm not going to contradict myself, but oftentimes it's about feeling emotionally safe. So if I show up in an environment, I'm the only black person there, I'm on guard, right? And not always, but I always notice, right? And so you're looking at these two men and that, right, who there, who there, yeah, oh, there's one, right? And so it's about emotional safety, psychological safety. And so sometimes these conversations are not safe, right? Sometimes they're
Straight
not
up.
safe. And so I am not recommending everyone go out there and talk to, somebody who completely disagrees with you, but I'm saying there is no space to do so. And that is what continues to keep repeating the cycle. I don't have the answer on how to fix it, but I
Right.
know that as long as we are dehumanizing one another, making assumptions about one another, and not talking to one another, things aren't going to get better.
Right. Well, and the thing is, and you and I both know this. If you're going to talk to someone, even if you disagree, have values different, misalignment, the best way of connecting with someone you may disagree with is finding that commonality.
Yeah.
But that oftentimes requires you to be in dialogue, or to have a conversation, or to keep an open mind, or and remind yourself of their humanity. I think the
Yeah.
other thing here, and I wrote about this in the blog today, is that I want to be in dialogue with these folks who are in the middle, who are not quite sure where they stand, or maybe they have really strong feelings, but they have these other kind of things. But they have a good faith intention to have, I think, honest dialogue. This other
Hmm.
percent of folks who I'll never probably have a conversation with is okay in my mind, and I think that's what Ta-Nehisi Coates was saying. I think it's identifying those individuals, being in conversation with them, and keeping that open. Because I personally think that's the majority of people across this country,
Hmm.
even if they are still maybe have racist ideas or sexist ideas or have behaving ways that kind of give you this sense that maybe they're that way, but they have a good faith effort of wanting to be in dialogue with you. And the
Hmm.
best way of doing that to me is finding that commonality. Look, we're all Americans. Maybe it's a faith tradition you come from. Maybe you're from the same town. I don't know. But find a commonality and get out there and talk to the folks you think you can. And that's usually my suggestion for folks.
I actually think in all of our topics today, there's a thread of a relational thread, a thread of being connected to other people and really seeing other people as human beings,
Yeah.
right? Like when we look at some of the world's worst conflicts, it's because you're not a human being. Therefore, you don't deserve to be here. You don't think like me, look like me, agree with me. Therefore, I can deny your humanity. And to me, that is so dangerous.
It is. It is. I mean, what you're hearing now is a lot of. who's American, who's not American, if you're illegal. I mean, we've seen over the last 10 years, for people kind of adjusting to the idea of undocumented, and then all of a sudden everybody and their mama saying illegal, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's
These are human beings. Yeah,
I'm
human
pulling the
beings.
rest of my hair out over here, Dr. Hill.
We already talked about your hair journey last time.
Mm. Well, I want to touch on this sex education, but we have part of me wonders if it would be best for us to move on to the side eye, or should we just talk about sex education, then give a little time to
I
let you
think,
kind of.
listen, both of these things are ongoing. Our side eye is ongoing, so we could talk about it now or next week. And sex ed, that is ongoing too. So,
Well, I definitely want to give time to the sex ed because of this. I live in the state of Texas, which still has weird rules around exposing children to sex education, as if they're not talking
people
about
in
it.
Texas are still having sex.
Are they?
Yeah,
I
they
didn't,
are. People are having sex. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
didn't
they are.
know, Dr. Helm. I
That's
was.
what human beings do.
They do.
They do.
Wow.
In your state, it's happening.
In my state, you
In your
sure?
state. Yes, yes, I'm pretty confident. Yes.
Well, what Nancy Reagan said back in the day. Just say no. Just say no.
I think she was talking about drugs.
Oh, oh my bad.
I don't think she was talking about sex. I don't think so.
Well, I want to give sex education more of its due. So let's go to the side eye. Let's talk about
Okay.
Chicago because I want to hear your perspective because I'm hearing the reason I'm messed up about it because we already heard about what's going on in Portland. That's been
Yeah.
shut down. We're supposed to hear from the courts today about their verdict around that from the judiciary. But our governor here in the state of Texas, Governor Hot Wheels, has decided with pride and whatever to send troops from Texas to Illinois to protect the ICE officers.
Uh-huh.
And I'll be honest, I feel a little, I don't, if embarrassed is the right word, but more just like, come on, man, this is the kind of
Well,
bullshit.
again, it's more dangerous, this, right? Like, because the idea was to what, send the National Guard to Chicago to deal with the gang problems? Since when does the National Guard deal with gang problems? Number one. Number two, there were children zip tied in South Shore, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. They were separated from their parents, right? Elderly people, right? People half dressed, dragged out of their homes. Their homes were broken into, damage done, right? Many of them US citizens, and kept out till 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're supposed to be okay with this, right? Like,
Mass
what was
A
the purpose of
vast
that?
majority of them are American
Yes,
citizens. And even if
exactly.
they weren't American citizens, you mean you're gonna bring in Blackhawks
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
apartment
And so,
complex?
yeah, and so, right there, I haven't seen the helicopters, but they're around where I work, right? Like, I, I don't even know if it's a side eye because it's
It's
so
more than a side eye.
stupid. Why is the
It's
National Guard in the city of Chicago? And how is it that the president sent them there? What is going on? Right?
and this I guess my frustration amongst the countless ones we can come up with today. There's a part of this community that we live in today that justifies it because there's supposed to be some gangs there, right? Members. There was supposed to be some other illegal behavior that was happening, and so basically, we're basically supposed to tolerate this. Have at 3 o'clock in the morning, children being mistreated and abused by our
Separated
government.
from their parents and then zip tied. Why are we zip tying kids? Why are we zip tying kids? Right.
Oh,
And
well,
this is,
and
these were African Americans, right?
yes,
Um, but of course, my righteous indignation and outrage is the same for what is happening in the Latin community, right? Like,
yeah,
these are human beings.
yeah.
How is our own military being used against us? What?
Well, and see, to me, this is again, we heard this early on after the election for some black folks because over 90% of black folks, particularly black women, voted for Kamala Harris, and we had somewhat of an uptick amongst black men who voted for Trump, and some said, you know what, we're gonna get out of this. But this is the very thing people said from jump why we should stay involved because whether it's directed directly at us because we're immigrants or because we're considered a danger, or secondarily for in this example we're talking about.
Mhm.
They're supposed to be going after gang members, but I'm outside with my shirt off in a zip tie. How
Yeah.
is that okay? How is you going through the entire apartment complex, busting with no warrants and
No warrant.
no kind of acknowledgement of who I am? And if I defend myself because I have a gun in my house, and
Hmm.
I decide, oh, someone's busting up in my house, boom, now it's my fault, and now I'm dead because they
No,
got
they
more
held a
firepower.
gun to a woman's head, and it's just, I mean, the trauma, like it's terrorism. It's terrorism. Like you have terrorized these people. People, human beings are being terrorized all over, right? And it's heartbreaking because you can never go back to being okay, right? You got, and you and I know from being psychologists what trauma looks like, right? It means, now you have sleep problems and eating problems and trusting people problems, and you can't close your eyes without, fear anymore. And, trauma takes something deep from people. Right now, I'm not expecting people who don't care to care. I'm not this. One, they ain't listening to this podcast anyway, right? And two, right, they're gonna keep scrolling. And two, you can't convince someone to care who doesn't care.
They
But
gotta
it,
want
it
to.
is heartbreaking and it is disturbing. It just is.
Well, in my mind, it's like the way they're able to rationalize it because you think about who's on the camera, right? It's these black and brown people, and then since they're not human, or because they probably broke the law somewhere, all this is justified.
But
And
probably broke the law is not breaking the law. We don't know. There is no due process, right?
no
So
due
all the things,
process,
no due
no
process,
warrants,
none of
no
that.
warrants. Yeah.
No,
And
no.
and it's being done by people whose job is not to protect and serve like law enforcement. It's military people who are trained to fight wars.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and I'll say this, one of my frustrations, and this is back to a conversation I think we had about meritocracy, right? We already saw that we have people leading like the Secretary of Defense and other departments across the White House that are not qualified, right? But then what we have on top of that is a bunch of undertrained, not well qualified ICE agents who were making buku money with $10,000 what's the word I'm looking for,
Signing bonuses?
bonuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting bonuses, right? And they're hiring all the, I mean, they're literally anyone who wants to come who's had any prior experience in the military or law enforcement. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised people leaving their jobs as a police officer in some small town decide to go do this for 6 months or a year or longer, underqualified, of not, if not qualified. Maybe they have a history of some foul stuff they did and decided let's do this. And the reason why I know that to be true because how they're conducting themselves
Hmm. Well,
demonstrates
at
that
least what
they,
we're seeing, right?
yes,
At least what we're seeing. I don't know. It just, again, I started our podcast today with a heavy heart for all the human suffering, and I'm leaving the same way.
yeah. Well, because at what point we're as a I mean, first of all, we've had a history as a country of doing some really foul stuff, right? But I think we've gone to a point where we are expecting ourselves to behave in a certain way, to respect the rights and privileges of people across this country, regardless of their status as a citizen or not. And what we're showing is that that can be basically kicked to the curb anytime they want to. And they're demonstrating that in today's behavior. I'll be honest, I feel like this is my frustration. There's a lot of things that were just, what's the phrase they use? It's like it was kind of understood that you wouldn't do certain things. It was kind of like it was just the practices. It wasn't necessarily illegal. It was just like it's kind of like the president sharing, or if you're running for president, sharing your tax returns. It wasn't legally bound to do it, but
Yeah.
you did it out of just common courtesy or expectations. And there's a lot of things that are like that in our country. And what we're finding is that at every turn, each of those traditions or expectations are being violated for
Hmm.
power, for
Hmm.
money, all kinds of stuff. And that's what's so, I think, so deteriorating in my kind of mind about how we, the state of our country right now. And so you're right. This is more than the side eye. This
It
is all
really
kinds of fuckery, for lack of a better. We'll have a segment on fuckery yet, but
Yeah. Next time we might have to do some more lighthearted stuff.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
we do have a little time, and I wanted we didn't we went straight to side eye and didn't get to a engagement card. So let me pull
Okay.
one out real cool. Um, hmm. Here's a good one.
Okay.
This is an engagement card. A time I noticed courage. A time I noticed courage was blank. A time I noticed courage was blank. Do you want to go first?
Courage in somebody else or courage in oneself?
However you want to define it.
Um, so I guess maybe I'll use my dad as a good example. He had all kind of health challenges, and I think that every time he had to go to a medical appointment, and this is anybody who has a chronic illness, right? I think it takes a lot of courage to continue to fight and show up for yourself, right? And to interface with medical personnel when you feel vulnerable. And so just kind of watching him, kind of every single time, he would even say, I'm not adding to the I'm not adding any levity here. Okay. But, I mean, I sort of have respect for people who show courage in the face of scary things, and medical stuff is just one example of that. So I would use my father. I think he was very courageous.
I love that. I love that. I'll be honest. I've seen a pattern lately in the last week or so. It's been I'll call them our seasoned. I don't want to say elderly, but you know what I mean. Folks are older
Okay.
who have been coming out loud and proud, trying to encourage young people to speak up, to stand up, to speak their truth, to figure out how to fight the good fight with all the things that are going on, and using their wisdom and their experiences and their kind of the legacy that maybe they came from as a learning tool,
Hmm.
and be passionate. I love that because one of the things I sometimes don't like about our culture overall is how we kind of discount older folks. If
Yeah.
you're, you know,
Yeah.
60, 70, we just kind of poo poo shoo shoo.
Yeah.
And that I guess what I've been noticing of the last for a long time, but particularly this last week, there's been a number. Particularly, there was a Latina at this event I went to for about George Sanchez. Latina, been in the community for a really long time, and she got up. She about I don't know 5'1", 5'2", but she felt so tall as she spoke about encouraging other folks, and I just love
Yeah.
that courage that it takes to do that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and to your point about that, we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors who had that courage, right? And so I think it's important to always remember they've run through some hard stuff. We're going through some hard stuff, but their sacrifices hopefully will give us the courage to persist and excel.
let's do one more since we're
Okay.
kind of going
All
out of
right.
order. This is our celebration card. This is maybe a
Okay.
little more challenging, but this one is choose a player. You and I are the
Okay.
players.
Okay.
And ask a follow-up question from their play. Any follow-up questions you want to ask? I have a follow-up question for you because you've
Okay.
talked about your dad on a number of
Yeah.
occasions, and I'll be honest. There's a part of me is like I kind of wish I would have been able to have met him, um,
He
but
was funny as hell.
well, I guess what were one or two qualities about him? And when I mean qualities, I mean things that he used to do or say that you remember about him that really that kind of stand out for you.
He had a foul mouth. So he could and I got it. So he could teach his students how to diagram a sentence using motherfucker. He did. Yes. Which got them engaged. It probably wasn't appropriate, but this was the 70s and the 80s. And so
Diagram a sense with.
yeah, yeah, he could. Yeah, yeah. As a noun, as a verb, as an adjective. So he was funny. He cared deeply about people. He was a counselor, which is how I became one. He worked with kids who grew up in Robert Taylor homes in Chicago and
Oh, really?
had a passion for that. And, he kind of helped shape my career path. And he just was, both my parents were pretty incredible. And my dad was just funny, but not when he was trying to be. When he was trying to be, he wasn't funny at all. But some stuff would just pop out of his mouth, and he was funny, and he had a passion for caring about others. He
I
was a good
love it.
guy. Yeah.
You have a follow-up
A
question?
Negro. Big guy.
I'm sorry.
He was a big Negro, real big guy.
Oh, sorry, it cut off for a second. So, do you have a question, follow-up question for me?
Yes. So you mentioned this event a couple times, and it seemed like you were really sort of touched or impacted by the celebration of this man who the school was being named after. What touched you the most?
Um, I'll be honest. There was a for the last couple of weeks, but at this event as well, there was a number of people who I've been collaborating with, who are partners in the work that I've been doing. But when I left the city to go work at National Instruments to head their DEI program, and now returning to my consulting work, I just haven't seen a lot of these folks. And these
Yeah.
are these are rebel rousers. They're activists. They're people doing like tutoring in the schools. They're professors, but I just hadn't come across them. We some of them I used to go to La Raza roundtables where you get a lot of these leaders, community leaders in the Latino community here. And what's great about being a witness to them because they all knew I wasn't Latino, but they knew I was representing the mayor's office, right? And to see the conflict, but also the love within the Hispanic Latino community was great. But I realized I missed a lot of them. Missed just seeing them
Yeah.
around. Missed their enthusiasm. Missed their voices and presence. So it was really nice to see them, and I was really pleased to have some time with them.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting that the relationships, even when you're not real close with people, those relationships still matter and can be impactful.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, these are people who, for me, they broke things down for me so I could understand why is that a thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
or why doesn't so and so not get along with this other person? He's just like, so even though I've been in Austin 20 years, I think during that particular time it was important for me to kind of get schooled on a few things, and these folks were
Yeah.
good at kind of helping the brother out. So cool. Well, hey, we had a lot of things. We're definitely going to talk about more about sex education. The other
We
thing I
are.
think we're going to talk about is the whole socializing.
Yeah.
People having difficulty being socialized, but we'll talk about those two topics next week. Other than that,
Yeah.
it's so good to see you, Dr. Helm, as
It's
always.
so good to see you, Dr. Fritz. Always sign it off.
Here we are, riffing while black. Enjoy.
Ripping
All
while black. Okay. Have a good one. Bye.
right, take care. Bye bye.